Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing that max effort build for the E4 supercharger that's on the C6 Corvette. And you guys might be wondering, well, what are we doing today? As you guys already saw, we did the Camaro lid, we did the spacers on the subframe, we got the lowering mounts for the engine mount, we did a little bit of clearance on the hood vent. The last part you guys saw was the 102mm throttle body and how we ported out the front of the intake to make sure that we get 102mm of air going through that throttle body to get into the supercharger pack. Now the last part of this is going to be the intake. You guys might be wondering, well, what's going on with the intake? Well, quite simply, 102mm, the next size up for that is a 4.5-inch intake. And you guys might be wondering, well, how are you going to fit a 4.5-inch intake on your Corvette? Well, this is actually be pretty simple. When the engine was actually jacked up with the standard mounts and the subframe lowering spacers, the hood would actually close. We weren't having any issue with the intake or radiator or anything like that. Since we dropped the engine another 3/8 of an inch, we need to resolve that spacement issue. Because now that the hood closes up top, on top of the lid behind me, well, I'll show you what's happening. If you guys see the 4.5-inch coupler here, the silicone hose coupler to go from the 102 to the 4.5-inch intake, as you guys can see, it's crushing up against the radiator. And I am not able to close the hood anymore. I'm able to close it, but what's happening is the intake is actually hitting the hood. And I don't want that aluminum to screw up the carbon fiber on the bottom of the hood. So to prevent that, what we're going to do is actually get another set of spacers. And this time, what we're going to be lowering is the actual cooling package for the car. We're going to be lowering the subframe that's holding up, not the motor subframe, but the radiator subframe that's holding up the radiator, the AC condenser, and the intercooler for the E-Force. Actually, this is that upgraded Edelbrock heat exchanger. I'll have a link in the video description for that above. That was part of last year's modifications. Well, the spacers, they actually do sell them. A company called A&A, they make it's a centrifugal blower. They sell the spacers. It's about $30, which isn't terrible. I mean, just to not have to cut anything, grind anything, or do anything like that, just order and show up and it's ready. That's okay. I think that convenience fee is kind of out there, but it works. Well, then I added it to my cart and shipping was going to be $16. How is it $16 for an item that's $30? Like, that's half the price of the item in shipping. So what I did was I looked through my hoarding of bolts, nuts, bolts, and stuff, and I actually had the spacer material. I had a old Elite Engineering spacer that's made out of aluminum. All I had to do was cut it down to the 5/8. The front is 5/8, the back is 7/8 of an inch. And so what I did was I cut these are the front bolts. I cut these down. I already had the hardware and we're good. Now the back is actually going to require new, longer screws because it's thicker and the spacer is thicker. So I believe these are actually, they might be oil pan bolts. Yeah, I think they're oil pan bolts. That will simply not screw it through the spacer because we won't have enough thread to get up into the frame. Plus the other thing you gotta remember is we gotta go through a bracket. So the fronts are gonna be a little bit short, but these will work. So all we gotta do now is get under the car, do one side at a time, take the bolts out, put the spacer in, tighten it back up, we should be good to go. Alright guys, you can see now that the silicone coupler is no longer sitting on top of the radiator. Actually, we've gained like another, probably another 1/2 inch over here. And that's simply because we put those little spacers in between the radiator subframe and the chassis. Now, I was going to film that, guys, but honestly, it's super hard to see. You guys might be able to see. You're not going to be able to see that. But basically, follow the driver's side frame rail over here that I'm pointing the flashlight at. Look down, and underneath there, you'll find the two spacers. You guys might be able to see that, but I doubt that. And it's really hard to see underneath the car too. It's just, you kind of have to stick your hand, like pull the bumper cover down a little bit and stick your hand up there. You'll eventually find the two spacers. They're two 13mm bolts. Back them out, put those spacers in, get your new hardware, put that in. Oh, and by the way, those hardware was it's metric 8 by 1.25. That was the thread count on the hardware. So it's a metric 8 by 1.25, and I ended up getting 50mm. Yeah, I believe it's 50mm. You go to Lowe's, it's metric 8 by 1.25 by 50. I think 50 is the length of the bolt in millimeter. That went perfect, went right into the frame, and we got both of those spacers. Oh, and by the way, I had to buy 4 bolts. I actually had to go back to Lowe's today and replace all 4 bolts because I thought that those transmission bolts that I had, or oil pan bolts that I had, those were not long enough. Like, they were probably too short by like 1/8 of an inch. So 4 bolts, M8 by 1.25 by 50. That'll get you plenty of length, getting into the thread certs that are in the subframe, and you'll be good to go. Also, just be careful with those because those are nut certs. Make sure they thread in and the thread is good before you send it home with a impact, not an impact, but like one of these battery powered ratchets, because you could easily strip one of those thread certs. I've done it in the past. They're not the strongest thing out there. So that, pretty simple, 4 bolts, drop it down, put them in, and that will lower your subframe, the radiator subframe. Alright guys, as you can see, we do have the hood fully closed. It's latched here, it's latched over there in the passenger side corner, and when I closed the hood, I did not hear the piping hit the bottom of the hood. So I believe we're good. So we've made the clearance that we need by lowering the radiator down just a little bit. The intake is no longer hitting the radiator. It's resting on this pipe a little bit, but that's not a bigger deal. Now obviously guys, this is just for mock-up. This pipe, I'm going to have to cut it down. I'm pretty sure that we're going to be cutting this pipe down. Probably maybe like 1 inch on the back end of it going to the throttle body, and probably maybe even 3 or 4 inches from the front of it. We're just going to have to see, because the intake we ordered is, I believe it's a 5-inch intake filter, 4.5, 5 inches in length, and that will definitely impact where we can stick a filter. So we're going to have to cut some pipe and modify this stuff. But, you know, we've gotten the clearance that we need to get this intake pipe down far enough so it's not rubbing up on the hood. So that's pretty cool. And again, this is kind of part of that max efficiency of trying to remove all the restrictions we can. So we got the big intake, we got the big throttle body, we got the big blower hat, and we should be good to go. So we're making this as free-flowing as possible going in, and obviously we've got a big exhaust coming out, and we're just removing the intake side restrictions that were already existing with the setup. I've seen one guy run an aftermarket intake. I believe it was 4-inch, but he had the standard blower Edelbrock hat. He didn't have the Camaro unit. He didn't run a big throttle body like mine. He just had a pipe. I asked him about it, sent him a PM through Corvette form. He like answered it, and then he must have found that thread, because those pictures that were there were gone. Like I couldn't find them. Like I tried to go back to reference to them, and they're gone. So I don't know if he was being paranoid about me copying his intake, even though I'm not. But that thread was gone. I never found it again. And unfortunately, this guy had a lot of posts, and I probably got through half of them. I just gave up. Like I did the keywords, didn't find anything, and so that thread was gone. So like we're kind of shooting from the hip on this one. Now I will say this basic design is, I am borrowing it from a guy with a heartbeat kit. His name is CIGS on Corvette forum, and I've been in contact with him, PM stuff about certain information, and so we're kind of copying his intake, but again, we're kind of modifying it for my application with the E-Force and having to drop the lower. I don't think he lowered the radiator subframe at all. Us, we obviously have to for this big intake. Alright guys, we finally got the air filter for the Corvette set up, and I've already kind of reassembled everything back together, and I've already put it in the car. Now, that air filter is from Vibrant Performance, and the part number is going to be Vibrant 2161C. So 2161C. And that was one of the very few air filters that come in a 4.5-inch pipe. And I actually didn't see many. I saw one K&N, maybe two K&N, and I found this Vibrant one, which I knew about from the CIGS, that guy who did the similar air intake setup for his heartbeat kit. But again, no one's done this for the E-Force that I've seen with 102 throttle body and all that. But so he's been running that. He's been running great times with it, and he's, in his opinion, it's not a restriction in it. So with that being said, I may upgrade to a K&N down the road, but I really just wanted an initial filter just so that we could start up the car, get this thing situated. And the filter was only $18 from Amazon. So, you know, it wasn't a $50 filter. I wasn't sure that's going to fit. K&N does sell a 4.5-inch flange filter that's about the same size. It might be a little bit longer. We'll just have to see. So if you guys want to look, here's that Vibrant air filter. I believe it's 4.5-inch wide on the flange. It's 5 inches long in length, and I think the diameter is also 5. So I think it's 5 by 5 by 4.5 on the flange. So as you guys see, I don't have anything like finalized on the, you know, hose clamps or anything, but I mean, really, this thing's so tight, it's pretty much where it's going to sit. And as you can see, everything fits. I'll try to get a shot from the front. You can see that a little bit. You see the top of the pipe, and we'll show you that the hood does close. This side latches. Now the driver's side, we still need to clear out the clearance, the vent. I haven't done that yet, but if you just, yeah, it latched. And so the hood closes, obviously, and I've checked my clearance. We're close, but I don't think we're touching. I think we've got like about a 1/2 inch of clearance. So as we've demonstrated, the hood closes. I'm pretty sure we're in the clear. There isn't much adjustability that we could do. I mean, I could cut the pipe a little bit shorter, but again, you run into, once you make a change here, it changes everything down here. And that 45-degree piece of pipe, you know, if you cut short here, it's going to draw the bend up, and you're going to be less going down into the trough here, if you want to call it that. I guess you could, where the airbox sits. So, you know, there's, again, pluses or minuses for everything that you do. I think for what we're going to do for now, for the dyno day, this is going to be perfect. I mean, hell, I was going to pull the hood off the car if I had to. But I think we've pretty much figured everything out. We just got to do a little bit of clearance for the hood vent on the very top of the supercharger. But that's 15 minutes with a Dremel and some painter's tape. And we're just going to clearance the vent itself. And that should be about it. Now the last thing that I need to do is actually add a plug for the MAP sensor. Now you can run your car in a speed density or SD tune, and you know, it kind of just depends on the setup. So the last thing we're going to do is, in case we ever want to switch between speed density and MAP based, we're going to be adding the GM Performance Parts bung, if you want to call it that. It's the mass airflow sensor bung. It's part number 191665574. And actually, this is from Chevrolet Performance Parts. Interesting. But that GM part number should work if you go to your local dealership and order it. So we'll show you what's in this. So in this packet, you know, nothing too special. This is just a LS7 style mass airflow sensor bung. You got some hardware, some bolts and nuts. I guess there's two. Yeah, that makes sense. Make sure you order the aluminum one, because you can't weld aluminum to steel and steel to aluminum, vice versa. So we're going to have to shave this down a bit and get it welded to the pipe, but I obviously am not going to be TIG welding that. I've already reached out to a local shop to have them work on this and have them place the sensor bung on the intake. So that'll be we might make another video about that, just because from what I believe I've heard, That needs to be shaved down in the corners because it's kind of like a universal fit, and depending on the size, diameter of the pipe you run, that will not sit flush. So that will probably be another intake video. Yeah, I almost guarantee it. And we'll probably do showing me modifying that piece, fitting it to the intake, going into the shop, getting it TIG welded, and then putting it back on the car. So yeah, that'll probably be another video in the future. So that's gonna be it for the intake setup install. Pretty simple. The Vibrant 4.5 45-degree piece, the GM Performance, that bung, and the Vibrant 4.5-inch intake. And by the way, I'm not sponsored by Vibrant at all. I've just had really good luck with their parts in the past. I've got Vibrant on the SS. I've got other Vibrant pieces on here, fittings and stuff like that. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. Also, if you want to know when I upload new content, hit that bell notification button down below. And as always, if you want to help support the channel, click the links below. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.